Welcome to our program, Psychological Studies. Today, the 13th module, Existential Conflicts. Our reflections will be based on our existence on Earth as immortal beings as we all are from a transpersonal perspective, reflecting together with the benefactor, Joana de Angelis, the spirit who is helping to enlighten humanity on Earth and beyond it. She starts by referring to that the march of progress is inexorable. It can be disturbed or hindered, but never retained in the conveniences of individuals or groups, paralyzing its process. The human creature of divine origin experiences the most different manifestations of life, developing the sublime values that sleep in germ until reaching the happiness that are destined to them. Human creatures are all of us, divine beings, evolving and progressing. The meaning of the intelligent life is ascension, which is achieved through the existential challenges that must be overcome because they are loaded with the negative inheritances which come from previous experiences without success and need to be corrected. All of us, beings in evolution throughout centuries and centuries, are back now in this blessed experience in a new body here on Earth for us to overcome or limits or negative habits that we may bring with us, and we all still have limits, shadows to overcome. With the advent of new psychological conquest around the human being, we can see that there is an atavistic inheritance, pointing out all individuals with identical facial and emotional expressions, without any contact between them. From a spiritist point of view, this inheritance comes from previous reincarnations, which imprinted the needs of the spirit, but also their achievements, enabling them to evolve gradually, whether a stage of the process of growth is overcome. So we are the consequences of ourselves, how we developed ourselves up to now, bringing our shadows as well as our achievements, our strengths, which still also need to be extended, fortified. With this realization, we understand that at the root of many disturbing processes, there is a psychological inheritance from another existence, resurfacing as a need for reparation in order to favor the spirit with new acquisitions without ties to the unsuccesses that were left in the past. New acquisitions, the purpose of life, evolution. Evolution means change, means actualization of concepts, of values, of behaviors, or attitudes, and in that way becoming independent of our previous experiences that we may bring with us on our unconscious level. In this way, happiness in the world is possible, provided that the commitment to achieve it is developed. We may ask ourselves, are we committed towards our inner growth? Are we committed to improve ourselves, to become better beings, to reach real happiness? Which kind of values, which kind of references, which kind of experiences brings happiness to us? No one is on earth exclusively to suffer, but to create the conditions of real health and full joy. Health on the psychological, emotional, biological, and spiritual dimension. We are integral beings. Thus, the existential challenges that present themselves as disturbing emotions, neurotic disorders, anxiety, guilt, stress, anguish, require attention and should be taken care of in a special way. Though the achievements of the modern psychic sciences, as well as of the contribution of spiritism in its nature of the science of the soul, we have plenty of resources available to help us either on the psychic science that are available and also with the contribution that is spiritism as a proposal of self-knowledge or self-transcendence offers to us for those who are willing to study, to reflect, and to live accordingly. Thus, happiness is triggered by the harmony that the spirit experiences, the pleasant sensation of fulfilled duty, moral rightness, giving the brain the production of dopamine, serotonin, noradrenaline, and other substances of the same type. The way that we think, the way that we feel, will activate in one way or another those substances. The conquest of happiness occurs when one moves from one state to another, in equilibrium, therefore, of greater harmony, working the reintegration of self and ego, working the harmonization the self and ego, using the mind, using the essence of ourselves to discern and to choose what is good, what prevails as good for us now and also afterwards. In the same way, suffering is a transition from the inferior situation, a stage that should have already been overcome. Suffering could be decodified as the inner wisdom giving us the feedback that the way that we are thinking and feeling and behavior is not in accordance to our essence. We already have the capacity to engage in a different level in relation to the experiences, but that will only happen when we learn to take responsibility for our own emotional responses and choose to re-educate ourselves in a different way, in a wiser way. Happiness, therefore, does not mean opposition to unhappiness. This state of well-being, of harmony between the ego and the self results from moral and spiritual achievements, from victory over challenges. Mental and emotional health, by extension, physical as well, will always be the result of these psychological balances that must be maintained in individuals who work inwardly, cultivating optimism and unrestricted trust in God and in life. Where are we in relation to our relationship with the Creator, God? Happiness, harmony, health, joy depends how we are relating with our Creator, God, who is love and created us with love. The need to face reality is part of human existence. Without it, the process of inner growth would be interrupted, giving place to profound disorders of behavior that could turn into pathologies. Every shadow that is not faced and processed, it could become more chronic, therefore pathological. But always there is a way to return to the healthy mind. The ego that fears the so-called failure, which is always a reparable mistake, decides to avoid challenging processes, masking reality, and moving to the world of fantasy, constituted of utopian and unachievable dreams generated by frustrations. Frustrations are the result of expectations from an immature state of mind. Small personality affirmation exercises and self-discovery of dormant values works as valuable therapy, eliminating the inferior complex and diluting the guilt complex. The practice of good deeds offers encouragement for broader realizations in interpersonal relationships, in social coexistence, and in the maturation of personal reality. Whenever someone is predisposed to help, they experience a strong empathy that results from continuous discharges of stimulating adrenaline that encourages new accomplishments and blocks irrational fears. Laziness or propensity for inactivity, not to work, is a deviance of conduct which deserves greater consideration than that which has been offered to it so far. Perhaps we have been giving little attention what actually laziness means on a psychological and emotional dimension. Laziness turns into pessimism that more and more promotes situations of negativity and resentment. The inner stagnation on a negative level. It can also become a mechanism of self-destruction in the face of a growing lack of self-acceptance, losing the necessary contribution of self-esteem towards a healthy existence. Negativity is toxicity, which is working against a healthy existence, worthwhile to overcome it. The person assumes a withdrawn and a silent position, avoiding any kind of stimulus that can pull it out of the constriction to which it spontaneously submits. We all are using our free will, either consciously or unconsciously. If we submit ourselves towards our negativity or the ego's immaturity, we are using our free will in a negative, unwise way. It is relevant for us to become aware and also to change that within us for our own good, for our own health, eliminating conflicts in that way. Its center of activity is the ego, the conflicts, which only considers itself, avoiding the relationships with other people, from which it could lead to enthusiasm and joy. The assessment made by the individual at this stage, on the stage of the ego, is always depressing, is always closed, is always negative. And this is where the withdrawing movement could happen. And as more as the individual would withdraw from the relationship from others, more disturbing these values will manifest within the mind and heart. From the spiritual point of view, the patient of laziness, which can become chronic, is still in the primary range of development, with no moral resistance to the struggles, nor personal values for the challenges. In other words, laziness reflects the immaturity of ourselves as immortal beings who are essentially psychological and emotional beings. As more as we transfer the responsibility of our self-realization process towards others, more we keep ourselves temporarily in this immature, suffocating state of mind. In the face of any impediment, he draws back, accusing others or afflicting himself in which he pleases him, to evade the responsibility he does not wish to assume. So we can learn here, with the spiritual benefactor Joana de Angelis, that each time that we don't take responsibility for our evolution, transferring it to others, we are complicating ourselves, we are generating conflicts in our existences. And the purpose of life on earth is to free ourselves from our conflicts through learning to take responsibility, which is autonomy, to improve ourselves, to put the efforts into that and do it because we are capable. We came back with that purpose. Sometimes the patient can receive some superior inspiration and wonder. Why am I suffering unnecessarily? So, up to when will I endure this deplorable situation? We can see, very negative, isn't it? It is vital to destroy the identity of the lazy, sick, useless person, experiencing the joy of the act of serving, of be an active instrument for the production of everything that means personal fulfillment. Vital to understand that anger is a feeling of maladjustment of the emotions, which deserves continuous vigilance, so that it does not become a second nature in the conduct of the person. Where are we in managing our anger? At the psychological root of the feeling of anger, there is some kind of unconscious fear that triggers it, causing the person to attack before being attacked, which makes him violent and unbalanced emotionally. If we have the need to attack for not to be attacked, that means we are already expressing all vulnerable aspects, which needs to be made conscious and also put the effort in to overcome. Once we learn to control ourselves emotionally, we will give rid of those reactions. It is fundamental to self-control that each one of us must maintain in relation to their emotional reactions of any nature. Disciplining the will, educating their feelings, and adapting to new healthy habits, essential to a healthy existence. Fundamental self-control. We all bring shadows within. We all are struggling in our emotional education process. We all are learning. We all are capable as long as we are willing to compromise ourselves with this self-education process. When the individual does not love himself, he considers himself to be unloved and is always in a strict vigilance over everything that concerns him, since it comes from others, but never from him, as he perceives the experience. The question or the wisdom is, the way that we perceive the experiences, is it according to the ego or according to the self? If it is according to the ego, we are mistaken. We are wrong. We are in conflict. If it is from the self level onwards, we see the experiences in a more realistic way, less conflicts. It is natural that the incidence of obsessive disorder on the part of the injured ego results in a high burden of emotional discompensation that the central nervous system has difficulty managing. Obsessive disorder, obsessive thinking, obsessive ways of being that impacts us in a negative way. The advance to deeper disturbances is inevitable because the person blocks discernment, and any invitation to balance, to renew behavior, produce violent reactions or false passivity, conflicting more, therefore. The new vision of positive psychology, in a very different way, understands the emotions, giving it an optimistic behavior in which goodness, forgiveness, pleasure, hope, faith, trust, the cultivation of virtues, love for humanity, courage and justice, spirituality, and the transcendence of the person. We can see the values from the self level onwards. Continuing, guilt is derived from the anger one feels in itself, turned inwardly in the form of a feeling of something wrongly done. This procedure pre-exists physical life because it originated as a grave act committed against the other, which generated conflict of conscience. We all bring the natural laws of life within our deeper unconscious. Any act, any move against them, conscious or unconsciously, brings conflicts to us up to the point that we choose to renew ourselves. And we can always do that in any moment in the present. To suppress guilt, to try to ignore it, is as negative as accepting it as a natural occurrence without discerning the gravity of the actions practiced. Taking responsibility towards what we did in a loving way and choosing from now onwards not to behave in the same way again. The antidote to guilt is forgiveness. This forgiveness can be directed to oneself, to the victim, to community, to nature. The guilt has to do with what was done wrong, while the feeling of shame denotes the awareness of irresponsibility, the knowledge of the negative action that was carried out. Behavioral and mental health imposes the release of guilt, using the valuable contribution of discernment that evaluates the quality of actions and allows for reparations when wrong and follow them when successful. Anxiety at present moment is a serious factor of disturbance and imbalance, which deserves special care, profound observation, and specialized therapy. The advance of serenity to face the challenges of existence makes the person's behavior become sick, full of disturbing expectations, generating incapacity for balanced actions, and developing of current moral ethical values. Unquestionably, many afflictions and disappointments that stun the human being come from the spirit that he is, that we are, bound to the conflicts that derive from previous transient bodily experiences, and still in the present we choose to repeat them, when in reality, in the present, the goal is to become aware of them and to transcend them. Let's engage in this inner transformation process. Liberating therapy must begin in the relationship of the torment. Liberating therapy must begin in the rationalization of the torment, working it through reflection and the adoption of optimism, so that patience and equilibrium can slowly settle in the intimate reality. When we reintegrate our disturbances or conflicts through a new way of addressing them, we are working towards building harmony, developing this settled state of mind in an intimate level. Uplifting readings, favoring mental and emotional renewal, yoga techniques, disciplining the will and the nervous system are valuable psychotherapy resources available to all of us in any moment in our existences. As for the problem with drugs, conflicts in the home contribute immensely to the move towards drugs. The absence of dialogues between parents and children, domestic assaults, unhealthy conversations and lack of affection in regard to domestic education expels the adolescent, often the child, from the family. The lack of continuous contact between parents and their children, not realizing the first changes in behavior when the initiation or the connection with drugs occurs, allows them to indulge in addiction with assiduity, creating serious dependence that, when perceived, requires adequate therapy. In the various addictions of chemical drugs, after a long period of use, it is possible to register changes of the center of the speech, with difficulty of syllabication, difficulty with the pronunciation, and other aspects. Without a doubt, education since childhood is the most valuable preventive therapeutic resource, because it is safer to avoid dependence than to quit it. The cultivation of healthy habits, considered as moral values, offers the well-being that generates personal and social harmony. They contribute decisively to the organic, emotional, and physical balance, providing a pleasurable existence, eliminating conflicts. On the other hand, the existential void also derives from boredom, from the repetition of experiences that are not renewed, from almost the indifference to other people, suggesting personal uselessness. The inner void refers to the incapacity that it takes of the person, suggesting impossibility or uselessness to fight against the tide of difficulties, allowing an indifferent resignation as a mechanism of self-defense that becomes a great internal vacuum. The existential aim of human life is to enable the development of all its dormant potentialities. This process depends on the choices, the lucidity, the aspirations, and the efforts undertaken. So, let's put effort in terms of developing our superior potentials, which will harmonize our minds, our hearts, our lives. Psychological maturation is imposed by self-consciousness through continuous internal and external realizations, overcoming difficulties and accumulating transcendent values that push to ever greater and greater levels. As more as we overcome our shadows or conflicts, more we develop higher references in our minds and hearts. Better we feel, more motivated we are, more we trust in ourselves, more we believe that we can change, as long as we compromise with this proposal. The virtue of courage comes at a time when the individual is free from family protection, home security, going through the different periods of adolescence into adulthood, and having to take responsibility. Without responsibility, there is no maturity, there is no courage. Self-awareness helps us to understand that it becomes necessary to discern in order to achieve, to insist, to succeed, to work hard in the chosen purposes, to err and repeat experience, to lose the naivety, to acquire maturity, to experience disappointments born of illusions, to understand reality, maintaining the courage not to disencourage or give up, indulging in self-pity and depression. Only who loses oneself can love only one loves oneself can love another. In other words, only when we learn to love ourselves are we capable of loving others. It is indispensable, therefore, that in us is self-love, self-respect, conscience of human dignity, so that our aspirations are dignified. Indispensable to generate the habit of loving without negotiating in any aspect that is desired. From fraternal understanding comes the feeling of solidarity, friendship. There's no requirement to make the person what they still cannot be, ending by loving them. Accepting people as they are, as much as we accept ourselves as we are, valuable beings, imperfect, perfecting, actualizing ourselves in our existences, in overcoming conflicts. Love, sublime, in whatever expression it presents itself, is the presence of harmony that must vibrate in human feeling. And if it's not vibrating at present, believe me, we all can choose to initiate this process. Loving ourselves, loving others, loving life, loving nature, loving the Creator. Each one of us must choose to offer more love than we receive, resulting in a constant exchange of happy emotions. Be willing to be a giver of love, even when we don't receive it back. Be willing to be an instrument of love in our homes, with our families, in our workplace, in our communities, wherever and wherever we are. Love is this divine therapy for all of us to free us from our existential conflicts. Learning to accept also the existential conflict sometimes as a therapeutic process in itself, as long as we can learn to accept us as immortal beings and therefore learners of ourselves as we journey through the pathway of evolution. Love is a profound psychotherapeutic process available to all of us. Engaging in this proposal of self-acceptance, of self-respect, be willing to be forgiving, be willing to develop compassion towards others, be willing to learn to be benevolent towards others' shortcomings and indulgent with their imperfections. Love is the movement of goodness within us and without and around us. We all are essentially beings of love. Let's activate that potential and feel joyful in the experiences that we are undertaking or are invited to undergo in order to learn, to become better, to become healthier, to become more joyful, because we choose our educational, therapeutical process of living our existences today, tomorrow, and always. Much peace to all.